Hello and welcome to the first episode of Real Time Recorded Live. I'm Dave Michels. I'm with Zeus Kerravala. Hey, Zeus.
Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm doing well. I don't know. We've done these videos for the last year and a half, and we never thought about doing it live before. This is an experiment. Maybe it'll be a successful experiment. Maybe it'll be like one of my other, more common experiments. But in any case, we're broadcasting live on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we're also on YouTube live. And feel free to drop in questions or comments, and hopefully we can get some interaction going. So, starting off the conversation, Zeus. I should probably just do the quick. I'm Dave Michels from talkingPointz, and Zeus here is Zeus Kerravala from ZK Research, and with that, let's go ahead and start our first story, which is around. There's a lot of ambiguity here, Zeus. Nobody seems to really know what's going on, but the ambiguity is that the Financial Times reported that Microsoft is considering unbundling Teams from Office to appease antitrust enforcement. Did you see this, Zeus?
Yeah, I saw it. Actually, I wrote a LinkedIn post about it, and I think to me, this is typical Microsoft, right? You wait until you have a dominant market share. I would say that Teams, if they really have 300 million active users, you would call it monopoly-like market share, because they forced people to buy it because of their licenses. Now they'll unbundle it, which just allows them to charge more, right? Because now you got to buy a Teams license and an Office license. If Microsoft really wants to unbundle it and see who has the best product that wins, my recommendation was every vendor should offer migration APIs, right? The big problem with Teams and Slack and WebEx and Zoom and all these is once you put about a month's worth of data into the thing, you can't move off it because the data is locked in there. And so, to this, I say to the entire industry, create migration APIs and make it easy for users to switch platforms. Then the best platform wins. But right now, all Microsoft has done is set themselves up to charge customers more because they already have them locked in.
Because they have to. We don't want to charge you more, but we have to.
Yeah.
But they've already been charging more because at first they were giving away Teams to anybody that could fog a mirror. And like every single plan of Microsoft 365, Office 365, whatever you want to call it, every single plan included Teams. And if you didn't buy that, you can still get Teams for free. I mean, pretty much there was 100 ways to get Teams for free. And now, because they've got such strong penetration already, that now they're starting to charge for it. They're starting to charge for the meeting rooms differently. They're starting to charge what's that premium package that came out a few months ago. And so now they're trying to figure out, it's like, okay, well, free was great while it lasted until we got monopoly status, but now we have to start charging for it. So I think that's one point. Another point is the article that the Financial Times ran is really unclear, and it's generated a lot of speculation. Because first off, it says unbundle from Office. And so it wasn't clear, because I think of it as bundled with Microsoft 365. So is it we're talking about software, like when you buy a Windows PC with Office, are you talking about bundling it pre-installed, or is it licensing that matters? Is that what they're going to unbundle, the licensing? Is it just Office, or is it, what about Microsoft 365? So there's all this conversation. And of course, some people, as a result of this wide degree of interpretation, there's a wide degree of the impact this might have. Yeah. If they actually unbundle the licensing, then I think that's pretty interesting. And if they only unbundle the software, like you have to download it, but you still bought it, then I don't think it's very interesting.
Well, I would assume if you're trying to avoid antitrust, then you'd have to unbundle the licensing as well, right? Because although I don't know, I guess that would just make customers pay more, maybe not.
Well, that was the issue with Internet Explorer, right? Because that was always free. It didn't matter what, but the point was that it was bundled, and so other browsers didn't have a chance.
Yeah, and so that's a great example though of when they lock people in, but then they did unbundle it, and then a better product came along, and they got their butts kicked, right? So with Teams, they have the advantage though of the data being in there, which is really hard to move, right? So we'll see this, and it is fascinating that I talked to a CIO of a pretty large university. They got about 70,000 users on campus. They're a big Zoom company. They love Zoom, but they said they're moving to Teams because they're already paying for the licenses. And I said, well, what's the experience like? He goes, oh no, it's like not even comparable. Zoom's experience is off the charts compared to the quality. He did say Teams is a great messaging platform, but because they're paying for it, they'll use it, and that's the playbook, right?
Well, for years it has been pretty clear that Teams was a pretty inferior product, but the rules kind of changed during the pandemic. I think Microsoft and Google doubled down, and they really improved the product. And so now you can say the product is comparable. At least some people could say that. But I guess the issue is for a company like Zoom or for Cisco or Ring Central or even Google for that matter, that if they want to sell their product, it's basically a double sell. They have to convince the customer to write a check to them, and they also have to convince the customer not to use a product that they already legally have rights to. That's a tough sell. That's a tough sell. And so a lot of companies, and the point there about Windows didn't used to be as good. There was like this unwritten rule. I think it was an unwritten agreement for years, for at least a decade. It was true with both Google and with Microsoft, that they would have basic UCaaS products. They would have basic meetings, basic telephony, but they were pretty inferior, and they left a lot of room for a vibrant ecosystem to thrive. And if customers didn't really want that, you could use Link or Skype for Business, and it would be okay. But if you wanted a superior experience, then you would pay extra and you'd go to another third party. But during the pandemic, the rules changed, and Google and Microsoft, to their credit, really improved their video meeting experience, really improved the calling experience, and the rule kind of changed. And so now it's kind of like, well, how do you compete with that? Because like I said, you have to unsell what they've already purchased. Kevin Keeler wrote a post on this, and I thought, because we trust Kevin for his objectivity all the time,
Yes.
But he wrote that this will have no effect. What did he say? It is unclear whether such a move would have any impact on the continued growth of Microsoft Teams. Now, of course, he's thinking that Microsoft Teams is such a superior product that it's not going to slow it down. I think it would have, depending how you interpret the rules. If people no longer, if they actually had to write an extra check for Teams, then they probably would consider writing an extra check to somebody else instead. But
yeah, I think for whatever percent of the install base isn't already using it, right? So if they really do have 300 million active users, that's a pretty big, that's a big enough install base that they can just mine that now, right? And I don't think the quality, especially on the calling side, they're missing a bunch of features. Teams native calling is expensive. They don't have calling in all that many countries compared to like a Ring Central or somebody who's been doing telephony a long time. So there's still a lot of holes in it. I know a lot of there are a lot of resellers that make a lot of money tying WebEx to Teams or Ring Central to Teams or things like that. So the fact that people are still buying the other products, I think is testament to the fact that there's still work to be done there. So,
well, the conversation's changed. So it's one thing with meetings and messaging like Slack, but it's another thing with calling, because the conversation is very different with calling. Because in the case of calling, because of direct routing, there is this vibrant ecosystem emerging, and I think what people are missing there is that, yes, it's a vibrant ecosystem, and a lot of providers are doing great with direct routing and adding a lot of value, but it's on Microsoft's terms, right? So you could add value to Teams, but you have to completely make yourself invisible, transparent. You have to adhere to all the UI and whatever of Teams, of the admin, and it's really, Microsoft's like, well, yeah, if you want to handle all the PSTN taxes and regulation and 911 and all that crap, fine, go to it. But we have total control of the software. So it's a different kind of monopolistic approach. Yes, there's a vibrant ecosystem, but it's still tightly controlled.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got 0 questions or comments on that topic, Zeus. I guess everyone vehemently agrees with us as usual. So let's go ahead and go on to the next topic for this episode of Real Time Recorded, our first episode. Again, if you have comments, go ahead and let us know. Let's see. So our next topic is Avaya. Actually, right on schedule.
Yes, this was fast.
Right on schedule.
But it should have been on schedule. Like, I mean, everything, whenever you talked to Alan about it, everything was prepackaged, ready to go. And really, it was just a matter of timing, right? They negotiated everything up front, and it seemed to be much simpler under Alan than it was under Mr. Chirico. So from an execution standpoint, this was almost flawless, right? Like, obviously bad execution got them into the position, but going through the process actually was pretty quick. And frankly, it's good news for the company. It's good news for customers. It's not great news for the employees that held stock. It's not great news for the old shareholders. But it does put them in a pretty good capital position, right? Only 150 million in net debt. And so, for a company that has struggled to really have a lot of resource to do things with, I saw you wrote a post on this main point you made. They're actually in a pretty good, this is the best position they've been in since maybe they spun out of Lucent. Right?
Well, actually, last time they came out of Chapter 11, they were in a pretty good position too. They had a lot of cash in the bank. They had a lot of options, and of course, we were younger on the technology curve, and of course, their customer base was even bigger. Yeah. There was a little more opportunity with the cloud back then. None of those played out the way they had wanted them to. So hopefully, the execution goes better this time. It'll be interesting to see which way they go. I want to point out that while the bankruptcy process itself was actually pretty condensed and shortened, like we talked about, like you just described, but it was also important to note that there was a lot of stuff that happened pre-bankruptcy. And so when you compare this to the last time, and I guess it was 2018, 2017, they just declared bankruptcy, and then that was when it started. This time they declared, I don't remember the months, I wrote it in that post, but they declared that they had, big financial problems. Alan had just been appointed. And then they went into the immediate negotiations, and they did all this stuff before, to your point, they prepackaged it. So the actual process was a little shorter. The actual bankruptcy process was much shorter, but there's still a lot of work that had to be done. And it still took a lot of time. Admittedly, it took less time this time than last time. A couple of surprises. Okay, we'll start off with what was a surprise. Coming out of bankruptcy, they're doubling down on, as they said they would, they're doubling down on the Avaya Experience Platform, which is their CCaaS, their multi-tenant cloud. I would say the difference between their CCaaS and most other CCaaSs is I think theirs is being optimized, not necessarily exclusively, but optimized to work in a hybrid environment. So they're planning on taking their CCaaS to existing CC customers and using their CCaaS Avaya Experience Platform as a supplement add-on to their existing products, where I think most other companies are looking at CCaaS as a replacement for contact center infrastructure. That was their agreed plan. That was what they said they would do, and that's what they are doing. I think you were on that call, Zeus, about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago when they gave us an update of where they're at. They talked about innovations that they're making, the progress they're making. They just got compliance in a bunch of countries for like credit card and other compliance matters. So they are making pretty good, steady improvements on AXP, and it is a differentiated strategy, and they are executing on it.
Yeah, and that should be their strategy. In fact, because of all their large enterprises, in fact, if you were to overlap the Amazon install base with the not connect, but the AWS cloud services with the Avaya install base, I would imagine that almost every one of the Amazon customers is using some form of Amazon hybrid cloud, right, or Azure hybrid cloud or whatever. So that is the go forward model, I think, for most large enterprises. I did some research in this a couple of years ago. 95% of enterprise class companies said they would do hybrid, and so for Avaya, they are this is the path they need to go down. It's not a super exciting path. It's not you can't be like Vlad and show a picture of the sun and say this is our whole market and things like that. But the fact remains is when you do business in 192 countries, you can't put up local pops in all those countries, right? So companies,
It's a logical path. You play the cards are dealt. Now I wrote in my post. I'll put you. It's a live show. I'll put you on the spot here, Zeus. I think that there's going to be some M&A in Avaya's future. My question for you is: do you think it is more likely that Avaya will acquire some companies, possibly for acquisition, possibly for people, or possibly for technology? Or do you think it's more likely that Avaya will be acquired?
That is an excellent question. In fact, I was talking to someone the other day that now that the financial floor mess has been cleared, you could argue that the Avaya acquisition clock has started. And given the size of their install base, given the massive reduction in debt, I got to imagine there's a number of companies, and given the fact that the creditors or the shareholders now were people that were creditors before and that want their money back, I would imagine that there are people probably taking a look at Avaya as an acquisition target. They, massive install base. And as you and I both know in communications, install base is pretty hard to get, right? The cost of acquisition's very expensive. And that's why, like, even when 8x8 bought Fuse, they haven't executed on it tremendously. But I do think the cost of acquiring all those customers would have been more expensive than what they paid. So
I think there's an excellent argument to be made to you, as you pointed out, that they could get acquired. I don't want to diminish that they could actually do the acquiring. And what Google taught us with UJET is you could acquire companies without actually acquiring them. And so to your point, with that base that they have, if they go to a smaller CCaaS provider and say, hey, how would you like full access to our contact center base with whatever technologies that you have, they can make a pretty good deal without actually having to write a check. And I think that it could go either way. It'd be interesting. I bet there'll be simultaneous conversations. Now, you mentioned the investors being on the board, the lien holders being on the board. They don't have majority. The lien holders, I believe, have 40% of the board. Alan's got a seat, and then there's and some independents that have been appointed. And that's what I want to talk about next here. They announced that Mary Lou Mako will be on the board of directors. That was a bit of a surprise. I didn't see that one coming. Did you see that one coming?
No, I really wasn't sure what type of talent they put on the board. It's not your. Where was her last stop?
She was the executive vice president of sales, basically CRO at Genesis. And she quietly left. It was in fact, her LinkedIn status still says she's there. She very quietly left back in January. And so it's interesting. I think that
I know she was at Oracle, HP. She's got a lot of really large enterprise experience, right? So
yeah. But she's on the board, and so from coming from a previous competitor, that'll be an interesting perspective on the Avaya board. I think Genesis has had actually quite a bit of I don't know how to say this, upheaval in both leadership and portfolio in the past 18 months, and they've just had a lot of turnover of their executives. Mary Lou being one of them. Went their CMO went to Twilio. There's just been so many people that John Hernandez left. There's just been so many people, and I think they lost. I think they really upset a lot of people with discontinuing multi-cloud, which I think was.
You can't say it's our future and then ditch it, right? So.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting because Mary Lou was on that ship, right? She was on that ship, and now she's on the other ship, and it'll be interesting to see what she brings. So with that, we got one other breaking story here. The breaking story, just read this here to you. Today at World Tour New York City, we, Slack, announced SlackGPT, a new conversational AI experience natively integrated into Slack. SlackGPT will deliver the ability to use generative AI, app integrations, different language models, and the power to tap into secure customer data insights from the Customer 360 and Data Cloud. Any off-the-cuff reactions to that one?
Who would have seen this coming, right?
Yeah.
I think as soon as Microsoft announced the AI Copilot, Slack probably said, "How do we create our own version of that?" And so, here we are. So, I guess everybody needs to have, when are we going to have the real-time recorded GTP or GPT?
Yeah, well, it's in. Well, we should announce it now because that's the game. You announce it now, even though it doesn't really work, and we have to figure out pricing. But I think there's. I tweeted this earlier. There's a lot of good reasons to integrate with SlackGPT. It's fantastic at summarization. It's probably its core competency. It's fantastic at summarization, and that could be really useful in a lot of different use cases, particularly within Slack and Salesforce. But I think the reason that these guys probably implemented it is because they don't have anything else innovative going on. I've been very critical of Slack basically since Brett and Stuart have indicated their loss, have left the company, and then of course Mark has kind of shifted back to financials and metrics and with protecting his board of directors as much as he can. And so I think the Slack acquisition by Salesforce is one of those things that a lot of people are saying, "See, I told you so." It's a shame. I don't think. We were at Enterprise Connect. Slack really didn't come up very much, and it didn't come up in any of the keynotes. It's just like not even there anymore. Slack who is my takeaway from that.
Well, Salesforce is a CRM company, and they've tried to pivot to something else, and have had a hard time doing that. I do think Slack is the right type of platform though to build Chat GPT into. Right, there's a lot of data in there that's frankly largely unstructured. Just people put a lot of stuff in there, and how often we use all these tools, right? And how often do you remember that somebody sent you something, in a message, but you don't really remember where it was. Yeah. And so if I can, have something to help me do that, I actually think there's a lot of value in that. So, but I don't think this is going to help them, cross the Teams chasm and, gain traction there, or, bring Slack back to the product it was. I don't really see, I see, all these features being for install base, right? I guess is what it is. Let the Slack install base do more, prevent them from jumping to another platform. But I don't think this really drives a lot of new business for them.
Yeah, we started this broadcast with the Microsoft bundling and unbundling conversation, and that was actually initiated by Slack. We didn't really talk about Slack in that part of the conversation. We talked about Zoom and WebEx and other video and meeting competitors and messaging competitors, but we didn't talk about Slack because Slack's not relevant anymore. But Slack is the one that actually initiated that. It was their complaint to the European. EU competitive antitrust division that started that resulted with Microsoft talking about unbundling. And so the question now is, does it really matter? And it's a shame because Slack's a great example of this. Slack was something that we heard over and over. People preferred Slack. Slack was better experience. Companies liked Slack better, but they all ended up going to Teams. And it's not really clear why. Maybe it is clear why.
Well, I do think. So people that liked Slack liked a lot of the slash commands and things like that. I will say the one thing Microsoft did was, and let's be honest, I don't give kudos to Microsoft very often, but they did make it usable by a much broader audience of people. If you're going to do anything advanced in Slack, I know a lot of kind of layman's complained about it because you had to remember it was kind of a hybrid platform of messaging and coding almost, so it wasn't the most, for IT pros and stuff, it was great, but it wasn't the most easy to use platform for a lot of people.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's our topics for this episode of Real-Time Recorded. The live format kind of keeps us on our toes.
Yes.
I don't know, Zeus. We'll see how this goes over. Let us know what you think, live format or recorded format. The recorded format is a little more comfortable for me, but
yeah. Now it's always better to do it live. And if you do comment on this, let us know what you think. Is Avaya an acquisition target or acquiree? Is Microsoft going to make more money or less money from this? I'd be curious to hear what other people think.
With that, thanks for watching.